Starting at the bottom of Daf Mem Zayin Amud Beis, the very last word. The Gemara here is discussing the two different Avedis in the Beis HaMikdash that sort of sometimes go together because we learn them out from each other in the Pasuk. One is Kemitza, when you took a fistful from the mincha, carbon mincha, whether it's flour, whether it was already fried. Then there's the din of chafina, when you took the two handfuls together of the ketairis to bring into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So the Gemara has different ibayis here. Most of them are from Rav Papa that he asked regarding these halachas. Bay Rav Papa asked as follows: Dafkei lekaimitz bedoifnei demana. So he took the kaimitz. When you take out the kaimitz from the carbon mincha, what are you supposed to do with it? You don't take it immediately to burn on the mizbeach. You first have to take that kaimitz and place it into another keli, into another klisharis. And then you take it in the keli and you bring it up to be burnt on the mizbeach. The reason is because by the carbon mincha, everything you do by the carbon mincha, which is with flour and oil, corresponds to the way a regular carbon of an animal is. Just like by a regular carbon, there's shchita, then there's you receive the blood, the kabbalah sadam, and then the halacha, then there's the zrika. The same thing over here. The kemitza, when you take out the flour, it's corresponding to the shchita. And then when you place it into a vessel, that's corresponding to like being makabel the blood. And then you have to bring it, halacha, you bring it to the mizbeach, and then you pour it on the mizbeach, you put it on the mizbeach, like zrika. So therefore, when you have to put it into a keli, the question is, how should it be put into the keli? Usually you put something in a keli, you drop it inside to the bottom of the keli. What happens if he attached it to the sides of the walls of this keli? Mai. Toich keli bi'inon. Is it enough the fact that it's inside the walls of the keli? You have to sanctify it in this keli, and that you've done that, it's inside. Or perhaps that's not good enough. It has to be placed in the usual proper manner, which is at the bottom of the keli. And it's not. So just like when you receive blood in the keli, you don't receive it on the walls of the keli, it goes into the bottom of the keli. So the same thing here, it has to be received properly and has to be placed into the bottom of the keli, not the walls of the keli. Teiku. It doesn't have an answer. Mar Baravashi has a similar question. Afche lemona, you turn the keli upside down. The dafke lekaimitz, and you attached the kaimitz of the mincha be'ar isei demona, on the bottom of the keli. So there are two pshatim in this. Rashi, not here, but Rashi in Zvachim explains that on the outside of the keli, in the bottom of the keli, there was some kind of a cavity that you stuck it inside there. So it's not inside the regular part of the keli, it's upside down, but you found some cavity to put it inside. It's one pshat. Another pshat that it says in the Rishonim in Zvachim is that it refers to a person that turned the keli upside down and he stuck it inside the keli, and it's suspended. It's sort of, he stuck it inside the keli, but now it's upside down, and he sticks it inside. Okay, and that's what dafke means, that he attached it over there, but the keli is not in the regular position, up. So what's the halacha? Mahu. Again, the same question. Hanache b'seichei be'inon. Does it have to be placed inside v'ha'ike? It's inside. Whether it's inside a cavity or it's inside the keli. Oidilma hanache ketiknei be'inon. It has to be placed inside in the normal fashion, in the regular way. V'leke. And that you don't have. Take. This also doesn't have an answer. Rav Papa, another question Rav Papa asked, and here we come back to the chafina, the handfuls that have to be brought from the ketairis inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Meloi chaf nafsha amru. When it says you have to have full handfuls, what does it mean full handfuls? Mechukais, does it have to be leveled out, exactly level to your hands? Or gedushais, or should it be heaping? Rav Abba brings a braisa, Toshama, Meloi chaf nafsha amru. When it says in the Torah, you full handfuls, what does it mean? Loi mechukais, it's not leveled, v'loi gedushais, and not heaping either. Ela tfufais. Tfufais is rounded out. So it's something which is, you have to smooth it out, round it out, but not completely leveled out. That's the mitzvah of Meloi Chafnav. It says Meloi. Meloi means full, so therefore it's not leveled, but it has to be rounded out.
How is he going to do it when he has his hand full?
When he has his hands full like that, so I guess the kind that places it, when he puts it into his hand, there's another kind that helps him out, or the way he takes it, he takes it in such a way that it's a good question. Zok the Gemara. We're talking about the Ketairis here, yeah? Okay, now the Gemara has another Ibaya of Rav Papa, but before the Gemara brings the actual Ibaya, it gives an introduction of how regular karbanis are done with the blood, and then from there it's going to come back to the chafina of the Ketairis. So first the Mishnah that it says in Masechtes Vachen. Tananasam, we learned there regarding the blood of a carbon. Nishpach adam al ritzpa. The blood of the throat of the animal after you shechted it did not go into a keli. It was spilled onto the floor. And then vasafa, you gathered the blood from the floor into a keli to pour to do the zrika on the mizbeach. Pasul. That blood that went onto the floor is pasul. The Gemara will soon bring the pasuk for this. But what happened if it was different? Minakeli ala ritzpa. The blood was received in a vessel, and then from the vessel it spilled onto the floor, and then vasafa, and then you gathered it into the keli. Then kosher. If it only spilled from the keli, then it's kosher. And what's the source of this? The Tana Rabbanan, because we learned in another brayse, the lokach midam hapar. Pasuk says you should take from the blood of the bull. Why does it say midam hapar? It's speaking there about the par. Why does it have to say again from the bull? Midam hanefesh. It has to be from the blood of the life of the bull that comes out when you shecht it. V'loy midam ha'or. This does not include the blood that's in the skin of the animal. That's not the mitzvah, to use that blood for zrike. And also v'loy midam hatamtzis, and not from the remnants of the blood after it finishes spilling out. There's like at the end, the remnants of the blood, that blood is not included either. That's why it says dam hapar, the dam of the life of the par, when you shecht it. Now, another drasha the Braisa says, and this is the source of the fact that it's not allowed to spill on the ground. Dam mei hapar yikablenu. The dam, you have to receive it into the keli from the par, not from the ground. And the Gemara explains, the Gemara explains, how do we know to darshan the pasuk this way, that midam hapar means dam mei hapar. As we'll see, what we're basically saying here is, in the pasuk, the word mem, the letter mem that is by dam. Midam hapar, from the blood of the par. The Gemara is taking the word, the letter mem, and it's putting it by hapar. Dam mei hapar, that you have to receive the blood directly from the par. How do we know to do this? To darshan the pasuk this way. Because if you'll read the pasuk as it's written, midam hapar. So what does that mean? That you only have to take some of the blood of the bull to spray in the mizbeach. Midam v'afilu miktzas dam. So then the pshat would be that you take some of the blood and not all of the blood. Is that true? But Rav Yehuda said, Hamakabel, when you receive the blood from an animal when you shecht it, tzarech sheyikabel as kol dam mishal par, you have to receive all of its blood. So we can't say midam means only some of it. Shenema, because in another pasuk it says, "Ves kol dam apar yishbach al yisod mizbeach." All of the blood has to be then poured onto the foundation of the mizbeach. So then, why here does it say midam only from the blood, some of the blood? Elosh mamino. So therefore, we know that we have to switch the letter of the pasuk. My midam apar. How do we read the pasuk when it says midam apar? Dam mei apar. Take that mem and put it by the hapar, and therefore it's read as blood has to come directly from the bull. Yikablano, that's how you receive it, and not if it drops on the ground. If the blood flowed onto the ground and then you picked it up from the ground, it's pasul. You can't use it for zrika. That's the pshat of the pasuk. And here the Gemara explains this is a unique kind of a drasha. Or kesavar, Tana of this brayso holds gairin. You remove the letter mem from the word dam, and then umaisifin, you add it to the word hapar, so now it becomes me'apar, v'darshan, and now you darshan that it means dam me'apar, that the blood has to come directly from the bull and not from the ground. Okay, this is the source, this is the halacha b'negeh to the zrika of the dam. This drasha, gairin, mesifin, v'darshan is very unique. You don't find it many times in Shas. It's actually brought in Maimorim Chassidus, what this means in Avodas Hashem. Gairin, mesifin, v'darshan means gairin. You minimize, you remove from the taivas of Olam Hazeh, Meisifin, and then whatever energy you had involved in Olam Hazeh, you could now add in Kedusha, and then V'darshan, and then you're able to expound and add more into Kedusha. That's how it's touched in Maimorim. Kopanim, so this is the source of the saying that has to come directly from the bull. So now, boy, Rav Papa, based on this, Rav Papa asks a question regarding the chafina, regarding the handfuls that you have to take for the ketairis. If the ketairis that you have in your handfuls was scattered around and it fell out of his hands, mahu. What's going to be the halacha? If you gather it then from the floor after it was in his hands and it fell out of his hands, could this ketairis be used? Yadoi kitzaver beheimer dami. Is the person's hands have the status like the throat of the animal, that the blood has to come directly from the throat of the animal into a keli? And the same thing over here, the ketairis has to come directly from your hands into the keli, into the kaf that you place it into, and therefore psula, it's going to be puzzled. Or perhaps kekli shadis dami. Your hand is already the kli shadis. Your hand has already received the ketairis to bring it in. It's not like the throat of the animal. Your hands is really already the keli to take it in. And therefore, once it falls out of your hands, it's like the blood that fell out of the keli that received the blood. And v'loi psula, and therefore it's not going to be puzzle. The Gemara doesn't answer this as well. So as the Mefarshim explained, the basis of this question of the Gemara here is, because if you remember what we learned in the beginning of the Perek here, it said that really a person should be, the Kohen Gadol that is, should be taking the ketairis into the Kodesh HaKadoshim directly with his hands. It doesn't ever say in the pasuk clearly that you should use an additional ladle to put it into the ladle. The only reason why we put it into a ladle is because of a technicality. There's no way that he can do both, hold the machta and the ketairis together at the same time. But really, he should be taking it in his hands. So therefore, the Gemara has the iboyet. Do I say that because he should be taking it in with his hands, so therefore the hands is already fully received? So if it drops from his hands, it's not an issue. You could just pick it up again from the floor and put it into the kaf and take it in. Or, no, now that the halacha is that you do have to take it from your hands and put it into a kaf, into a ladle, and you're not bringing it in with your hands. So your hands is not yet that keli that you bring it in with. Your hands is like still the throat of the animal, and then the kaf is the keli that is brought in with. So therefore, if it drops out of your hands, it's not good. It becomes puzzle. Like the blood that's dropped from the throat onto the ground, it becomes puzzle. Rav Papa had another shaila. Chishev b'chafinas ketairis mahu. You had a thought, an invalidating thought, when you were doing the avodah of chafina by taking the handful of the ketairis. The lashon chishev by kachim always means that you had a thought that will invalidate the carbon. What does that mean? So what thought did the person have over here? He was thinking to himself that the Kohen Gadol that is thinking that he's going to do this avodah tomorrow. Just like when a person does by any of the karbanis, he has a machshava that he's going to eat it chutz lizmanoi, he's going to do the zrika chutz lizmanoi, or the achil of the carbon chutz lizmanoi. Here the Kohen Gadol, when he does the chafina, so he had a machshava to do it to do the avodah of the ketairis chutz lizmanoi, not in its right time. So the question is, does that machshava invalidate this ketairis? Is this like a regular carbon, and therefore the machshava of the Kohen Gadol invalidates it? Mahu. Me, Yamrin, do I say, Yalif, Meloi, min mincha. I learn out the Gzeir Shava. It says by the Chafina the word Meloi. It says by a mincha the word Meloi. Ma hasa mahanya ba machshava. Just like regarding the mincha, the halachas of pigul, the halachas of a person having the wrong machshava that passels the mincha applies to a mincha, so it applies as well to the Chafina of the ketairis. Hachanami mahanya ba machshava. So here as well, the machshava is effective to invalidate the ketairis. Oiloi. Or maybe not. Maybe we don't apply the Gzeir Shava. We don't use this Gzeir Shava. We don't apply it for this purpose. Earlier, the Gemara discussed this Gzeir Shava as well. There, the Gemara was talking about the Gzeir Shava regarding the word bekumtzai. It says by mincha bekumtzai that it has to be your fist, has to be exact. And the Gemara wanted to know if you apply that to chafina. Now the Gemara is asking the question regarding this Gzeir Shava, regarding another inyan, regarding this detail. Do I say that the machshava of pigul applies to chafina just like it does regarding karbanis and regarding a mincha? So the Gemara answers, Amalei Rav Shimi Barashi Rav Papa, Toshima, I'll bring you a raya, because there's a Mishnah that says in Chagige, it's an idius, and then it's brought in Chagige, so it talks about the special chumris that there are by kachim. So Haisif Rabbi Kiva added and said that you have hakaimitz, or others are geiris. The right gersa here in the Gemara is hasailes, the flour that's used for the mincha, v'haketayres, and also the ketayres that's brought into the Beis HaMikdash every day. You're on Yom Kippur in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, v'halavayna, which is for the shtei alechem, v'hagechalim, and the coals that are also used for the ketayres. Shem naga tful yaim b'miktsasan. If a tful yaim, person that went to the mikveh that day and he still did not wait till at night, so he's somewhat tamei. So if he touched b'miktsasan, if he touched a keli that has these things in them, any of these things of kachim in them, pasal as kulan. It pasals everything. It pasals the entire keli. This is a special chumrah that there is by kachim. Only by kachim, if you touch part of it, the rest of it becomes tamei. So Rabbi Kiva here is saying that this chumrah, this stringency for kachim applies to all of these things. And one of them was ketairas. Ketaitis is part of this category that this applies to. So now, how do we bring a raya regarding the machshava of pigul? So the Gemara explains, Kasol kedaitoch. So now, as Rav Shimi Barashi was thought to say as follows: Mid the pasal tvul yoim. Since I see that the tvul yoim will passel everything that's inside this keli. So what does that mean? That means, as Rashi explains, that whatever is placed inside the keli gets a kedushas haguf. There's two different kinds of kedushas when it comes to things that are kachim. One is kedushas damim, which means that only the money, the value of it has kedusha, and then there's an intrinsic kedusha, that the very item itself has kedusha. So the reason why all of these things have a special stringency in tumah is because there's a kedushas haguf. It's placed inside a klisharis and it's kaddish itself. And therefore, if part of it becomes tameh, all of it becomes tameh, and even through a tvul yaim. So in pasla namilina, once it has the kedushas haguf, any item of kachim that's intrinsically holy, so then if it's kept overnight, it becomes pasal. You're not allowed to have any kachim remaining overnight. This is true about all kachim. We had this before even regarding the waters of the kiyar. The water of the kiyar, which has a kedushas haguf, if it remains above ground overnight, the water can't be used the next day. That's why they used to submerge it every day underground, as we learned before. Right, so the same thing over here regarding all these things, including ketaides. The ketaides has a kedushas haguf, so therefore it becomes pasal if part of it was touched, and if it would remain overnight, it also becomes pasal. So therefore the Gemara concludes and says, umidelina pasla, if leaving the ketaides overnight would pasal it, so pasla nami machshava. So if so, we see that it has a kedushas haguf like a regular carbon. So if it has the kedushas haguf like a carbon, so therefore an invalidating thought when a person is thinking, the Kohen Gadol would be thinking that he's going to do it tomorrow, that's also going to pasal it. And therefore from here you see that according to Rabbi Akiva, the same halachas of a carbon applies to the chafina of a ketaides. So it's interesting, the chafina of the ketaides is sort of has a halacha like a carbon, has a kedushas haguf and has a halacha like a carbon. By Rav Papa asked a question, another question here. Chishev bechatiyas kecholim. If the Kohen had an invalidating thought that he's going to do the avodah in the wrong time and so on, so he had this machshava not when he was taking the handful, but in the earlier stage. Bechatiyas kecholim, when he went on the mizbeach to take off the coals of the mizbeach, to be used for the ketaides. So this is not yet the mitzvah of the ketaides itself. He's coming to bring the coals that are going to be used then for the ketaides. Mahu. What's the halacha here? Machshire mitzvah ke mitzvah damu. This aveda of taking the coals, which is only a preparation for a mitzvah. We're preparing the coals that are then going to be used for the ketaides. Is that like the part of the aveda of the ketaides itself? Or it's not part of the ketaides itself. So Rashi has two pshat in what the Gemara's question is. One pshat is that the Gemara is asking, should I say that this preparation of bringing the coals for the ketaides is part of the aveda of the ketaides itself, and therefore it'll passel the ketaides? So it's like you started already the process of the aveda of the ketaides, so it'll passel the whole ketaides. Or no, maybe Rashi says that's not the Gemara's question. The Gemara is asking not that it should passel the whole ketaides, but it should passel the coals. These coals should not be able to be used because you had an invalidating thought when you were shoveling these coals. So these coals become passel, but it doesn't passel the whole ketaides. That's the shayla of the Gemara. And here as well, Teiku, the Gemara doesn't answer this question. So this machshire mitzvah ke mitzvah dam. So usually, actually, we say that the machshire mitzvah is like a mitzvah. That's in the positive sense for using a mitzvah, being Mechal Shabbos for bris milah and so on. A machshir of a mitzvah, at least according to Rabbi Eliezer, is considered to be part of a mitzvah. This is a subject that comes up in many cases. Machshire mitzvah, whether it's part of the mitzvah itself. Huh? Yeah, and a lot of different things. We learned about it. But this over here, it's a little bit different. The Mefarshim was saying when the Gemara asks the question here, we're talking about whether to passel, sort of in a negative sense. Do you say that the machshir of the mitzvah is so much part of the aveda, not only in the positive sense that it's considered to be a chelik of the mitzvah, but also enough a part of the mitzvah that it could passel the whole aveda or could passel the coals? That's a separate question, and therefore take with this there's no answer to. Now the Gemara brings another question. Really, the Gemara is soon going to continue with the questions of Rav Papa regarding the chafina, but for some reason the Gemara interrupts in between with another more general basic question, which will have a raya from our Mishnah. The question was asked from Rav Sheshis. when you deliver the blood. That was one of the avodas by the karbanis, right? There's the shechita, then there's the kabbalah, then halacha, you have to bring it, and then the zrika. So this halacha, when you walk with it, when you deliver it to the mizbeach, b'smail could it be done, mahu, could it be done holding it in your left hand? We know all the avodas in the Beis HaMikdash is supposed to be done with the right hand. But regarding halacha, we have that question. So Rashi says, only regarding halacha we have the question because the fact that halacha is part of an aveda is not explicit in the pasuk. All the other things, it says clearly in the pasuk, the Kabbalah, the Zrike, it says clearly that it has to be done through a kayin. Halacha is only learned out with a drasha, but it doesn't clearly say. So maybe this could be done with the left hand. Amalu Rav Sheshes said, Tenisua. We learned this here in our Mishnah. What did it say? Notal, Samachta bimina. He's holding the shovel of the coals in his right hand, Vesakaf, and the ladle with the ketaides, Besmaila, in his left hand. So he's bringing the ketaides with his left hand. So there's a clear Mishnah where it says that the ketaides is in his left hand. So the ketaides is like a carbon. We said now we said that the ketaides is like a carbon, and therefore the machshava of pigul applies. So just like there, you can bring it in your left hand over here as well. So the Gemara, this is a good answer, very clear Mishnah. But now the Gemara asks, why do you have to bring a raya from here? V'nifshet luhu, why can't you bring a more direct raya from a carbon? From this that it says regarding a carbon, haregel shel yamin, when you're delivering the different parts of the animal to be burnt on the mizbeach. So the regel shel yamin, the right foot of the animal, besmoil, the kohen holds in his left hand. Ubeis oira lechutz, the place where the hide of the animal is facing outside, so the bloody part of the foot should not be sticking out. But what does it say here? When the kohen delivers the foot to be brought to burn on the mizbeach, he holds it in his left hand. So why can't you learn from there regarding the blood that you deliver to the mizbeach? That's a much more direct raya than bringing from the ketaides. So the Gemara answers, no, that raya actually is not as good as the raya from our Mishnah. If I would bring a raya from there, Havamin, I would say, Hanamili haylacha de lemakve kapara. They were talking about bringing the parts to be burnt in the mizbeach. That's not intrinsic to the actual kapara of the carbon. It's just, there's a mitzvah to burn the parts of the animal of the mizbeach, but the kapara is the blood. And that's not part of the kapara. Aval haylacha de makve kapara, but bringing the blood, which is part of the kapara, loy, maybe that could be done. Maybe that cannot be done in the left hand, it has to be done with the right hand. Therefore, Kamash Malan, therefore brought a raya from the ketaides, where we learned before the ketaides is a kapara. If you remember, we learned before that the ketaides is a kapara for Lashon Hara. So therefore we have a raya from the ketaides that even something that's being done for a kapara could be done in the left hand. Okay, so the conclusion here is we have a clear raya that the haveda could be done with the left hand. Let's finish this subject about this doing the Aveda with the left hand. The Gemara brings a question on this. Meisvei, ask you a question from another Braise where it says as follows. Zar v'oinen shikir balmum. So different, if you have a zar, he's not a kayin, a oinen, a person that someone passed away, a close relative just passed away. A shikir, he's drunk, he drank more than a revius of wine. A balmum, a person that's a balmum. So all these kinds of people, bekabbalah, b'hilacha, bezrike, whether receiving the blood, whether delivering the blood to the mizbeach, whether spraying the blood on the mizbeach, postel. The aveda will be postel. Then the Braisa says, v'chein yoshiv, so too, if any of these avedas are done when you're sitting, it's also postel, because it says lamed l'sharis, you have to stand. And v'chein smile, and then the Braisa clearly says, any of these avedas that are done with your left hand, postel. So it clearly says, one of the things that it mentions here is halacha, and it says that it's going to be posel. So the zrike of the halacha of the blood is going to be posel to yufta. So this refutes what Rav Sheshes said. Rav Sheshes wanted to compare the halacha of the blood to the halacha of the ketaides that's done in the left hand. It's not the same thing. The halacha of the blood must be done in the right hand, as it says clearly in this braisa. That's okay. So we refuted what Rav Sheshes said. Now the Gemara asks, Rav Sheshes hu da'isva. Rav Sheshes himself knows of this braisa that we just brought to refute his opinion, because he himself brought this braisa as a question. When did Rav Sheshes use this very braisa itself? Rav Sheshes la Amayre Rav Chiste, because Rav Sheshes said to the Amayre, this is the interpreter of Rav Chiste that was interpreting the words of Rav Chiste. So Rav Sheshes said to the interpreter of Rav Chiste, Baye minay Rav Chiste. Ask Rav Chiste the question. Haylacha bizar mahu. What's the halacha of halacha? Delivering the blood to the mizbeach. Could that be done by a zar, or does it have to be done by a kohen? As I mentioned before, halacha in the pasuk, it never clearly says that it must be done by a kohen. It could seem like a very technical job because you just have to deliver it from one location to another. So Lav Dafke would need a kohen. It doesn't say it ever in the pasuk. So therefore he told the Amira, ask Rav Chisda, does it have to be done by a kohen or not? Amalei, and Rav Chisda answered him, Kisheda, that it could be done by a zar. It doesn't have to be done by a kohen. Umikra misayeni, and Rav Chisda said, I have a pasuk to support my position that it does not have to be done by a kohen, because there's a pasuk in Divrei Hayamim where it says, Vayishchatu ha-Pesach, and they shechted the Pesach. Who did the shchita? Not a kohen. The shchita doesn't have to be done by a kohen. And then Vayizrku ha-Kohenim, and the Kohenim sprayed the blood mi yodam, that they took from their hands of the people that shechted it. Va'aleviyim afshitim, and the Leviim took off the skin of the animal. So what do you see in this pasuk? When it says ha-Kohenim mi yodam, the Kohenim took it from their hands. From whose hands? From the hands of the one that shechted it. So it seems like the same people that shechted the carbon, which are not Kohenim, they are the ones that delivered the blood to the Kohenim to do the zrika. So you see over here that the one that does the halacha, delivering the blood, does not have to be a Kohen. So the Kabbalah has to be through a Kohen. But then the Yisrael, the ones that shecht it, they're the ones that could deliver the blood to the Kohen to spray in the Mizbeach. That's what Rav Chisda paskin. The halacha does not have to be through a kohen. And then on this Rav Sheshes asks the question: Zar, ve'oinen, shikr, balmum, all these people that we mentioned, bekabbalah, by lacha, bezrike, pasal, receiving the blood, delivering the blood, and spraying the blood. It's all pasal. V'chein yoshev, if you're sitting, v'chein smile with your left hand, it's all pasal. So you see over here that Rav Sheshes himself used this braisa to ask on Rav Chisda, how could you say that the halacha could be done through a zar? So how would Rav Sheshes before himself say that the halacha could be done with your left hand if he himself seemingly was aware of this braisa where it clearly says that it cannot be done with your left hand? So the Gemara answers, Basar the Shama, after he heard of this braisa, after it was asked on his own opinion, then he said that the halacha could be done with your left hand. And they asked on him from this braisa, Hadaisva. Then he came and asked Rav Chisda from the same braisa. So first, he heard of this braisa when they asked on his opinion. And then he used this same braisa to ask Rav Chisda on what he said, that a zar could do the halacha of the dam. But now the Gemara concludes and explains, but for Rav Chisda kra ka'amar. Rav Chisda brought a pasuk in Divrei Hayamim. The pasuk in Divrei Hayamim says that the Kohenim took the blood miyad dam. The Kohenim took the blood from the Eden, from a Yisrael that was bringing the blood to him. So doesn't it say that the Kohen doesn't have to do it? So the Gemara answers, the Ovid Maise Itztebe. The Yisrael that the Kohen is taking the blood from did not deliver the blood. He was doing an action like a platform. He was holding it in one place. He didn't move. The Yisrael held the blood. I guess the Kohenim were busy, so the Yisrael stood there and held the blood in one position, and then the Kohen took it out of his hands, but the Yisrael did not walk with it. He stayed in one place. That's what it means, miyadam. That's one pshat in the Gemara. Another pshat in the Gemara is, itztaba means that there was Yisraelim that lined up, and one Yisrael could pass it to another Yisrael. So as long as the Yisrael is not actually walking, as long as he's not moving with his feet, it's not a problem. The malacha, not the malacha, the avodah of halacha is walking with your feet. That's not allowed to be done by a Yisrael. That has to be done by a Kohen. Here it means each yid serves like a platform. He's just passing it over from one to another. But we actually had in the Gemara in Psachim that it was done through the Kohenim. The Kohenim lined up in a row and they would pass it over from one to the next and then they would pass it back. Okay.
Also,